Hey everybody, welcome back to the I Play 2 podcast. I'm your host, Rob Adler. This week, vocalist and musician Monica Mancini joins the show. She is a double Grammy-nominated vocalist who has recorded with artists such as Placido Domingo and Michael Jackson. In addition to recording 5 solo albums, Monica has also performed with the Boston Pops, London Symphony Orchestra, and has performed in venues such as the Royal Albert Hall and Carnegie Hall. Her father, Henry Mancini, composed multiple TV and film scores, including The Pink Panther, Peter Gunn, and Breakfast at Tiffany's. Also, Monica's mother, Ginny Mancini, was a singer who sang with the Meltones, backing up Mel Torme. Monica, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Rob. Thank you for allowing me to have this conversation. It'll be fun.
Thank you so much. First question I have is, and with your background, I could probably figure it out, but I'd like to hear it anyways. How did you get so involved with music?
I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion that the kids would become musically inclined in some way, given my dad's background, and my mom, as you mentioned, was a singer. So music was all over the place all the time. So it was kind of destined to be the case. I have a twin sister and a brother, and my twin sister is in music, but she's in music education. So she's about educating young minds to have them be musically inclined. And my brother is a music publisher and a musician as well. So we're all sort of in the biz.
Are you all still pretty close, even though now that you're adults?
Well, yeah. As a matter of fact, just before I started talking to you, I was having a conversation with my sister, which I do about 5 or 6 times a day, given that we're twins and we're very close. And we live pretty close by each other. So we're about 20 minutes away drive time to each other. So we see each other all the time. My brother is a little more distant, but we talk to him as much as we can. So we're a pretty close-knit family.
You ever have one of those twin moments where you're like, hey, I should call my sister, and she calls you?
Like every other minute. It used to happen more when living under the same roof. But yeah, and oftentimes, well, not so much lately, but we used to meet at the mall or something, and we'll show up in exactly the same outfit. It was kind of bizarre. So that just shows you that we shop at the same places a lot and we have the same taste. So we end up wearing the same thing. So we're kind of funny that way.
What was it like to grow up in a house so filled with music and with your dad being so involved in the movie industry? Who were some of the guests that would just kind of pop in?
Oh, gosh. When we were young growing up and my dad was sort of in his Peter Gunn era, he had a lot of friends that were in the jazz world. So a lot of those people I didn't know, but Mel Torme certainly was a guest at the house a lot. And he would sit at the piano and sing because he loved to do that kind of thing. Quincy Jones was over quite a bit. He and Dad were really close. But like I said, back in the late 50s and early 60s, it was more of a jazz-centric thing. And then Dad became more involved in scoring films, and then a whole different group of people would sort of appear at the house when he got into the movies. Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck. And my all-time favorite, just a wow moment, was when Sean Connery showed up. What their connection was, I have no idea, but he was there and I was swooning. Let's just say I was swooning.
Other than Connery, who were some of the favorite people I guess you got to meet? And later on in life, did you ever get a chance to work with any of them?
My heroes were my musical heroes. So my last CD that I made, which actually was quite some time ago, I got the opportunity to sing with Jackson Browne and with Brian Wilson and Stevie Wonder and Felix Cavallari from the Young Rascals. And those are the people that I really adored. So getting to work with them was really a thrill. And then I was a studio singer for a number of years before I stepped out to do a solo. So I recorded with, I can't even think of how many artists I recorded with, but probably everybody you can think of. I was on a record where I used to sing with a lot of choirs and a lot of choruses. And for the big blockbuster movies and films, they would hire 20 singers, and then we'd do all the oohs and ahs or whatever was required. But I kind of got to work with and spend time with a lot of different types of people.
I'm a big fan of Stevie Wonder, and I have a friend who is a ginormous fan of Stevie Wonder. What was it like to work with him and be able to record a song with him?
I worked with Stevie twice. He did, with Take 6, he did a beautiful arrangement of Moon River, where he played the harmonica. Actually, both of these recordings he did with me, he was playing the harmonica. And so he did Moon River. And then when I recorded his song, Blame It on the Sun, from my last CD, he played harmonica on that as well. He's a lovely guy. He's hard to nail down in terms of getting him to commit and show up. But boy, once he does, he's there for the duration, and he will do it until he gets it absolutely perfect. So he's a lovely guy. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, and obviously a tremendous artist. So it's always fun having him around.
In terms of actually getting down to the nitty-gritty and working, is there a preparation that you have to work with each individual artist, or is it a generic preparation where it kind of doesn't matter who you're recording with?
Oh, no, it has everything to do with the artist I'm recording with. In the studio world, aside from being a solo artist, you just do what you're required to do, and you have to just sing what you're told to sing. But no, I mean, when I was working with all these people on I've Loved These Days, which was the name of the CD, we were all in the studio at different times with the artists, and we worked together. Jackson would make sure his guitar licks were perfect, and we'd work out harmonies together. And so it's real specific and real personal to whoever the artist is. It was a wonderful collaboration. It felt like we were both doing this for the very first time. It was really beautiful. It was a great, great experience for me.
Last question on kind of the collaborations here. If there's one artist that you haven't collaborated with, but that you'd like to, who might that be?
Speaking about that particular album, I was this close, and I'm putting my fingers together like real close, to having Paul McCartney on the record with me. And we went even so far as to sit down in his studio in Soho in London and work out the guitar part. And he was singing the duet part with me of the song. It was I'll Follow the Sun. And he was almost signed, sealed, and delivered. And then a tour got in the way. He had to open Shea Stadium or something. And so life got in the way, and we had a deadline for the song to be done. So I had to abandon that idea. But the whole experience of me just sitting with him and literally collaborating was a trip. I couldn't come down from that for a long time. So collaborating with the Beatles, I think, is way up there. It's way in the top 2.
Growing up, were the Beatles kind of an influence for you? Because I know jazz was prevalent in the family, but was rock and roll as well?
Yeah, I mean, when we were kind of early teenagers, when my dad started to really cook, but at the same time, he was writing what he was writing, and we were listening to whoever was popular on the radio. So I was a huge Beach Boys fan and a big, obviously, Beatles fan when they came out. I was what you would call a major Beatlemaniac. There's no doubt about it. But we also loved playing Sound of Music and West Side Story Broadway shows we would have on the record player all day long, too. So it was a real mix.
Being a Beatlemaniac, every Beatlemaniac that I know has a favorite 2 or 3 songs that the Beatles did. What are those 2 or 3 songs for you?
Number one, bar none, top of the top is All My Lovin'. And why, I don't know. It's just when I drive in LA, which is not very often because I hate the traffic, but when I do get in my car and I have the Beatles channel on, when that comes on, I crank it up, and sometimes I pull over just to kind of listen to it and sing along. Please Please Me is one of my all-time favorites because when that record came out, they used to be released as singles along with their records back in the 60s. And so when the record store opened and we knew that a new Beatle tune was going to drop, we would stand in line at the record store. This was in Northridge, California, where I was raised. And there'd be on Reseda Boulevard, the record store. And you knew that it opened at 10 o'clock and you wanted to be the first one to buy this record. So I have the 45 that I still have. So those are my 2 all-time favorites.
You mentioned the Beach Boys as well. I'm a big Beach Boys fan, and true story here, whenever my family and I, we would go on vacation, the first hour in the car would be Kokomo on repeat. And I'm not kidding. My dad loves that song. And to this day, he still does not know the words, believe it or not.
He knows Kokomo, right?
He knows Kokomo, but that's about it.
Gosh, to be honest, that would not have been in my top 10. I have to tell you that right now. But that was a big one. Because you know what? You could actually visualize where they were. I thought it was a very colorful song, and you could really picture yourself on the beach and all that kind of stuff. So it was cool.
And we were headed to the beach, so I think that's part of why my dad played it.
Well, great minds, right?
I know you've worked with John Williams. Because he is a legend for people who are Star Wars fans, What was it like to work for him that maybe wasn't a Star Wars project?
John has been a personal friend of the family for as long as I can remember. And we used to take vacations like to Laguna Beach with his wife at the time, Barbara, who passed away at a very young age. And so we would spend a little time at the beach. And then when I was singing on films, I don't think I ever did a John Williams record date. We just are sort of friends. And the most recent thing I did, and I don't know if you or your listeners saw it, it was aired about 3-4 months ago, the piece on CBS Sunday Morning, where we went in to re-record and recreate Peter Gunn. John Williams played original piano on that tune back in, God, whenever it was, late 50s. So we just went in and re-recorded Peter Gunn with an all-star cast with Quincy Jones and John and Herbie Hancock and Arturo Sandoval and just the creme de la creme of LA recording musicians. And we killed it. We did this amazing recording. So working with John, I did that very recently. I wouldn't say working with him, but I was standing around. So that's the most recent project we worked on. But I would have loved to have been one of the studio singers for any of those films, but just never kind of worked out that way.
I actually did watch that piece, not when it aired, but I watched it later. A friend of mine actually told me about it, and he was the one that actually alerted me to you. He said, she'd be a really good guest for the podcast.
It was a lovely piece. That was sort of a kickoff to a project that Greg Field, my husband, and I are producing with the family, and it's the Year of Mancini, because my dad in 2024 would have been 100 years old. So we are planning a year-long events of concerts and television things and a documentary, and there are a lot of things in the works. I think about 3 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, aired the second CBS Sunday piece, where we went in and recorded Moon River with Michael Bublé with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and that was kind of cool. And Lizzo and Sir James Galway, famous flutist that recorded a duet at Pink Panthers. So we've got some really exciting artists that have participated and are participating in this recording project that will be for release right around Dad's birthday in April.
I would not have guessed Lizzo being a part of that project.
Her audience knows the Pink Panther, and every audience that you're going to run into, from little people to old people, will know the Pink Panther. And she actually decided to come on board because she is a major, I can't even say fan, her idol growing up playing the flute was James Galway, who I don't know if your listeners know, but he is a world famous flute player, and he used to do concerts with my dad every year at the White House. And he's a very famous classical musician, but he and Dad would do concerts together. And Lizzo happens to be a major fan. And so when we worked out putting them together, it was a thrill for both of them, because James, his whole thing is teaching students and loving to play with young people and having them come up and play classical flute and pop flute as well. But a lot of people that have never seen Lizzo's shows don't know that she plays the flute in all of her concerts. So she likes to get that in when she can. So it was a great collaboration. And the truth is that Lizzo's audience now will be exposed to some Mancini music that maybe they hadn't been exposed to before. So that's one of the purposes of our putting this whole thing together, is for the legacy and for young audiences, new people, to experience Dad's music. People love it. People hear it. They respond to it. And so we're going to give it to them.
The Pink Panther, the theme of that, I don't care what age people are. I'm pretty sure people at least have heard it, if not know it.
Because of the cartoon, children know this song. And the movies, thank God for Turner Classics, they play the Pink Panther quite a bit on rotation. And so it's out there for everybody to hear.
When people do make the connection of who your dad is, does it ever bother you that they say, oh, hey, you're Henry's daughter, your dad wrote the Pink Panther?
Never. I couldn't be prouder of the fact that he was my father, and that I get an opportunity as a singer to sing some of the greatest songs ever written. So it's a really good fit. I never get tired of it. And when I am out doing concerts and perform, when I meet with people afterwards, everybody is telling me how one song or other affected them. It usually happens with Moon River, and that someone got married to it, or the graduation to it, or had my baby to it. And these songs really have an impact on people's lives. It's like me and the Beatles. It's like being introduced to something when you're open to hearing things and they stick with you. And that's happened a lot with Dad's music. So I never get tired of it. I love it and keep it coming.
You mentioned that there's a potential tour for your dad's music next year that you're working on. Any idea about when that's going to be or cities and dates?
I wouldn't call it a tour. We just finished one in Miami. It was kind of the kickoff to this whole 100th celebration, and it was extraordinary. And then we're doing kind of one-offs. It's not like it's this organized tour. As we speak, other dates are being thrown out there. So we'll just kind of pick and choose the best venues that we think would be a good fit for this whole project. And it won't be on a website or anything because there is no, in quotes, tour per se. But we're going to be out there preaching the gospel of Mancini all over the place.
Going back to performing, how do you prepare to go in front of the crowd in terms of getting your voice ready? And because some venues are bigger than others, how does that all work for you?
It's a work in progress. Back when I started to do those things and do symphony concerts, it was, I don't want to say terrifying, but being a solo artist was not the path that I had planned to take. I only made that left turn because my dad had passed away and I was given an opportunity to go out and sing his music as a tribute concert. So I agreed to do that. But I was very happy in the studios, just showing up in jeans and hanging out with my friends and singing on people's records. So that was my career path, and that had been my mother's as well. So the solo thing was disconcerting at first. I think every time I do it, even after, oh my God, I don't know how many years I've been doing this, but a lot. And there's still something to learn and still a way to get better and still a different way to interpret the music. So I'm always trying to make me better. So if that means warming up a little more than I normally would, I'm kind of lazy by nature. So I'm not a big get my voice in shape, prepare kind of person, but I do whatever I need to. I don't make a fool of myself out there. But like I said, it's ever evolving. It's not like I show up to each gig with this one planned sort of way that I prepare. It's just a little more free form than that. Does that kind of answer anything?
Sure. It tells me you're not superstitious.
No, I am not superstitious. In fact, I operate in a totally different way. A lot of people that I know who do these things, concerts and things, they've got their ways of preparing and having their quiet time and having the lights a certain way and having sage burning or whatever it is. It's just not kind of what I do. I just try to breathe and keep relaxed so I don't freak out there, but I don't tend to freak out on stage much anymore these days.
I have a question about a place you performed because I kind of view Carnegie Hall as one of the pantheons. What's it like to take the stage there?
I've been there now, let me think. I did my own concert there, and then I've been there 2 other times. One singing with Barry Manilow, and then doing a concert with Michel Legrand. And it was great. There are a lot of stages that I feel that way about. Another one is Royal Albert Hall in London. There are these places that have such mystique and such grandeur to them. Carnegie Hall is a really, really special place. I will say that for all they say about Carnegie Hall and the acoustics and all that kind of stuff, I was not madly in love with the acoustics in there. I probably shouldn't say that at all. But for me, it wasn't like the thrill. Sometimes halls are just set up where your voice, when you're performing, you're enveloped by the whole thing. I thought Carnegie Hall was more like I'm on stage and the audience is in front of me. But for other halls, it's like you're all sort of in one space. I can't describe it really other than that. But you're right, Carnegie Hall, I mean, come on, it's Carnegie Hall. It was very exciting. But there are other exciting places as well.
Whether we're talking Carnegie, Royal Albert, Disney Hall, Boston, wherever it is, and whatever that favorite venue that it is that you've performed at, is there a sense of feeling like, wow, I really made it?
The first time I really had that sense was when the first time I played the Hollywood Bowl. And that's just because, A, it's on home turf, and also because my dad, when he wasn't out doing symphony concerts and wasn't home writing for film, the Hollywood Bowl was his performance home since the very early 60s. So every other year, he was at the Hollywood Bowl during the summer. So the first time I took that stage, I was really emotional, and they've since redone the Hollywood Bowl since the first time I performed there. But they used to have the backstage set up as it was when my dad was there. So the first thing I wanted to do was just go and be in the dressing room where he used to hang out and just kind of soak up the vibe. So the Hollywood Bowl for me was the first time that I thought, oh man, I've made it now, for all of those reasons. But yeah, I would think that would be the one for me.
When you go out and perform at a new venue, do you ever get that, not necessarily the feeling of wow, but kind of the fact of this is kind of still a pretty cool experience. I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing.
Oh God, yes. All of them. There are some orchestras clearly that are a lot better than others, but the opportunity that I have to get up there and sing my dad's music is really special to me. And I try to make it as accessible, and I set everything up with little stories and anecdotes that people don't know to give the songs and to give the whole evening more context. And people go away from my concerts knowing a lot more about Dad and knowing why some of the songs were written and stories about that. It just gives people another layer to the experience. And for me, as I mentioned earlier, it's just an opportunity for me to interpret something or to just give it something that I hadn't given it before.
When you're on stage, what's a favorite anecdote or story you like to tell?
Well, the story of Moon River, because the truth is that they were going to cut it from the film because it was running too long and they were trying to find ways to cut it any way they could. And they decided to cut the song. And Audrey Hepburn was in that meeting when they were having this discussion, and she got out of her chair and said, "Over my dead body." That's not going to happen. So the story's been out there for so long, so people either know it or not, but 9 out of 10, they don't. And so they really enjoy hearing that kind of story. There's another song that I sing, which was my dad's favorite song, actually, Two for the Road. Audrey Hepburn was in that as well, and she wrote my dad a letter. And I quote the letter on stage before I sing the song, but it was that she asked him, please, you would be the perfect person to write the music for this script, and I really want you to do it. And so those are just little jewels that I pop in there on occasion. But most of the songs I sing have some kind of story, whether they were Oscar nominated and they lost to some stupid song, in my opinion, stupid song. So that kind of stuff.
Speaking of awards, you've been nominated for a couple of Grammys. What was it like to be notified that you were a Grammy-nominated artist?
Gosh, it was kind of surreal. I remember I was in New York and they were announcing the Grammys, and New York is 3 hours ahead. So they announced the Grammys really early in the morning, like 5 or 6 or some ridiculous time in the morning to make the East Coast morning shows. But I was waiting for them to say the name, and they did. And I was kind of like, really? Really? It was nice. It's always nice to know that people judged your work worthy of being a nominee. So it's always a good feeling when you're, I don't want to say like accepted, but when you're recognized, it's nice.
Going back to where your career started, how did you initially get into becoming a true vocalist and a musician whose voice can cross so many different boundaries?
I started to get into singing because that's what my mom did. And she used to be a singer on all of the variety shows, like all over the place on television. There was the Danny Kaye show, and there was the Judy Garland show, and there was the Red Skelton show, and there was the Dean Martin, all of these variety shows. And they had staff singers on the shows. And so when we'd get out of school, if the timing was right, my mom would take my sister and I to work with her, and she'd be in the makeup chair and she'd be dressed in this wardrobe, and then she would sing live on the TV shows. And so I kind of got this experience about what she actually did, and it was really fun. And I thought, God, I could do this. This would be really cool. So that's kind of what led me down that path. But to speak to what you're asking specifically, until I started recording my first albums, that's when I really started to figure out that I can cross genres, and I have a wide range of tastes and ways that I can sing. When you're working in a studio, you're specifically asked to sing a certain way for a particular product or whatever you're doing, but you don't have the freedom being a studio singer to kind of cut loose and be a soloist. That's not the idea. So when I was afforded the opportunity to go out there and do it, and I'm still a work in progress, and I'm still, I hate to say in quote, finding my voice, because probably found it a long time ago, but there's still ways can still appreciate and sing jazz and sing pop and do all those things to some degree. So that's just a function of me getting experience and making records and being influenced by artists that I loved growing up.
Did you ever have a chance to perform with your mom singing a song?
No, nothing professional, but at parties and at functions, benefits and things like that, a little bit, but it was only for fun. It was never a serious undertaking. So we just did that to get some giggles, but it was never a serious recording or anything on stage, anything like that.
Was there any kind of advice when you decided you wanted to get into the music business that she gave you about being a singer and maybe some things to look out for?
The short answer is not really. I just sort of decided that's what I wanted to do, and I just kind of went after it. I learned a lot from her just paying attention and just observing. So there wasn't anything she could really teach me. And if there was, she just kept it to herself. She just kind of let me go after it. But with my dad, too, other than making sure that we were taking piano lessons, and there were no such things as music classes in school when I was growing up. So that was not something that we did. We had to sort of just figure out how we wanted to incorporate that in our lives. But neither of them really gave advice or did any of that. They just kind of saw what I wanted to do and just said, okay, you're doing fine. Go ahead.
It's kind of interesting. I would have thought that maybe they would have given you a little bit more advice or just kind of maybe warned you about some of the perils and things to look out for. That's interesting.
I'm trying to think back now when you're asking me this question, but honestly, no. And it's not that they didn't care. I guess they just didn't think they had anything to tell me. I don't know. But no, they were never that vocal about warnings in the business. Back when we all started our careers, or when I started mine, there weren't all that many pitfalls to look out for. If anything, it was a very competitive choice that I made because there are only a handful of singers that can do a certain number of things here in LA.
Since we're talking about your folks and family here, away from music, away from entertainment, what's a favorite memory that you have with them?
It was always Sunday nights, and it was always when my dad wasn't out on the road and he was home on a Sunday. The whole family, now when I say whole family, it's just me and my brother and sister, so it wasn't like this massive family, but my dad would cook. His big thing was he loved to cook pasta, so he loved to just come up with a different recipe every Sunday. And it was sitting around the table and drinking wine and having pasta and just a lot of laughing. So it was always to do with a table somewhere, being around it. And we took vacations together as a family. So my dad loved to ski. That was sort of his favorite recreation. He didn't play golf and he didn't play tennis. Skiing was really what he loved to do. So we would take ski vacations, go up on the mountain together. But I think, and I'm sure my brother and sister would say the same thing, that memories were always about being at their house and just kind of hanging out. My mom was around a lot, so we saw her quite a bit. And Dad would be the first to say that, oh, I wasn't around that much. I was out on the road and I wasn't a good father, which is such crap because as far as I know, he was around as much as I was. So he was very attentive and a great dad, and he loved those moments together. So that would be it.
What was the favorite pasta dish that he made? Because I could sit here and talk pasta all day. I love pasta.
He never got too exotic. It always involved something red. So he didn't get into a lot of butter and cheese. He was a red sauce kind of guy. So he would just get his plum tomatoes and put in a little garlic. It was always simple, but every time he'd make it, he'd throw in one little, oh, I chopped some green peppers this time. And he'd like to talk about how he was altering his recipe all the time, which was pretty adorable. So it was always simple, but always something he could handle. It was cute.
Red sauce. Sign me up for that. I love red sauce. That is my favorite.
Yeah, those tomatoes. Loved it.
When you said your dad liked skiing, I was expecting to hear, oh, we hung out with Jean-Claude Keely in 1971.
No, but I mean, back when we used to go to Sun Valley before we switched to Colorado, that's where I first met Jacqueline Kennedy back in the early 60s. And the Kennedys used to go skiing there, their whole family. And I met Jackie Kennedy, and my parents skied with them a little bit. My parents were dear friends with John Glenn and his wife Annie, so they were kind of part of our skiing family. And they remained that till they passed, which was pretty recently, actually. So Jean-Claude Keely, he may have been passing me by on his skis, but I never did meet him. But I'm sure there were other big skiers that I met that I wasn't even aware of who they were.
I just love the fact you just drop in Jacqueline Kennedy, and I know you can't see me, but my jaw went wide
Oh,
open.
when my mom passed away, she had just stacks and stacks of photo albums. She just loved her photos. And so we'd go through them and decide which pictures we could toss and which we wanted to scan to save. And there were quite a few from Sun Valley. And I found the one of Jackie standing there in her little ski pants and jacket and standing next to Mom. And I thought, God, that is really cool. Anyway, yeah, but it was a Kennedy thing. So I guess that is kind of a big deal.
I would say so.
Yeah, those are good times.
So who's the best skier in the Mancini family?
That would be my brother and sister. They still to this day ski. When Dad passed away, the kind of air went out of the balloon for me for skiing. We were all really proficient and loved to go skiing, but the fun for me was getting up early and going up with the family and having long lunches at the top of the mountain and then skiing down after a little bit of wine, which is not the brightest thing you can do, but it was kind of an event every time he was around. And then when he wasn't there anymore, all this stuff started kicking in like, oh, it's too early to get up. Oh, it's too cold. Oh, this equipment is so heavy. Just let all that stuff sort of flood my head. And so I haven't skied for a million years, but my sister and brother still are avid skiers. We have a place in Vail, Colorado, which my brother is in as we speak. And that's where the family will be going for Christmas. But the ski bug just kind of left me quite a few years ago.
You mentioned that you're going to Colorado for Christmas. What was a Christmas like growing up in the Mancini household?
Well, we did go skiing quite a bit, Sun Valley, and then we shifted to Vail after a while. But a lot of times we'd be home. But it was right out of a TV commercial. Show up in your pajamas in the morning and have brunch. And honestly, it was just like any other family. It was just relatives and all that kind of stuff. Now, when we went skiing, it was obviously a bit more festive and just took it to a different place. And we had a lot of friends in Sun Valley and in Vail. And so families would get together, but not related families of friends. And we spent every Christmas in Vail, at least with George Schlatter and his family, which was always kind of a hoot if you know who that is, because he's one crazy, crazy guy. You know that he created Latin, right?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. So with that kind of mind, things tended to get a little nutty. And Jimmy Connors and his wife, so they would be over a couple of times when they used to go to Vail for Christmas. And it was fun. It was a lot of fancy fun.
What's your favorite George story from those times that you can tell?
Oh, gosh. Well, he loved pulling pranks. He and my dad one time showed up at the front door. This was of our condo, and they both showed up together. They had stacked all these sweaters. They had put on like 6 sweaters, one over the other, over the other, over the other. And as they came in, they would be laughing with each other hysterically, and we didn't know why. And then all of a sudden, one would peel off a sweater, and then there's another one underneath it. And then my dad would peel one off. And then George would peel one off. And then it was so stupid, but it was hilariously funny. And George, he was very loud and over the top, and he did love to have some holiday libation, as one does. And he and my dad just had this goofy, odd sense of humor. So they kept each other in stitches. And as a result, the families would be roaring in laughter the whole time just because they were so dumb. Couldn't even tell you what they were. It was just their shtick, their routine together was just ridiculous. And it was funny and it was adorable. And those were the fun times in Vail. So there were some good times, a lot of laughs.
Somewhere, and I don't know where it is, but I know I have it. My grandparents somehow got me an autographed photo of the cast of Real People, which George was one of the executive producers on.
Ah, I missed that one. I mean, I know he did that, but I forget who was on that show. Who was on that show?
Byron Allen, Skip Stevenson, and there's somebody else that I'm forgetting.
Yeah, I don't think I ever caught that one. So I must have been busy doing something else during that period of time.
Watching it as an adult, I'm not sure why I liked it as a kid, but I could say that about more than a few shows.
Yeah, no kidding. I hear that.
We've talked a little bit about your dad, the 100th anniversary of his birth next year and what you're doing. Are there any projects that you're working on solo for yourself?
No, they all will involve the 100th, because that's kind of our focus right now. So everything that's coming up for me will have to do with that. We're really trying to make a big push for the whole year of 2024 being the Year of Mancini is what we've called it. We'll see when that all sort of dies down a bit, where I go and what I do. I don't know. I'm open to anything, and concerts still will be a part of that. If someone wants me to do a concert, boy, I'll do it. And most of the time it's requesting a Mancini repertoire, but I've got 4 other albums of stuff that I've done. So oftentimes I'll just sort of stick in a few songs from the other things just to mix it up a little bit. So nothing definite at this point, but you can be assured that somewhere I will be doing something.
When it comes to recording a studio album, what's kind of the process like? Kind of take me through the creation of the songs, actually getting into the studio, and then actually getting the publicity to get it out there.
That's why people sign with a label, because they'll be the creative person and go in and record what they want. But if you're lucky, the label will believe in you and will spend some money to promote it. Those days are sort of waning, but I always take a lot of time and care when I'm going to make a new record to get the concept down, to figure out where I'm going with it. I don't like to randomly throw songs together. It doesn't make sense for me. So I like to have a focus. I had always wanted to do a record of singer-songwriter where I lived musically growing up. And that would be my singer-songwriter phase. And when I did that album, I just kind of made a list of, okay, who are the artists that are my dream artists? I mean, my first notion was to do a duet thing and have the people that wrote the song come on board and either sing, play, whistle, play harmonica, whatever it is they would be. But I wanted that collaboration there. So I just chose the songs that I really adored. I did a lot of research. I listened to a lot of music. I just picked out the artists that I loved, and then I would listen and listen and listen to all the songs that they had written. And so I narrowed it down. And then my husband, who is my producer and my drummer, he's a really good producer, and he knows how to make things work and who to hire. For this record, I didn't want to hire the same musicians that I would use, say, on a very orchestral record. I would make a Mancini or film music or whatever. So I chose people that were more pop-oriented and that were expert in that field. And so I wanted the feel of it to be very different. And Greg just kind of puts it together for me. We work very collaboratively. A lot of artists don't want to have anything to do with the repertoire, believe it or not. They know they want to make a record and they know what they can do, but they would rather have their producer or record company select the material. I know a couple of artists that work that way. Other artists write their own stuff and they know exactly what they want to do. But there is definitely a process, and it's usually the process looks pretty much the same for each record that I've done. It's just different choices. Are we going to use an orchestra? Are we going to use a trio? Are we going to use this? Are we going to go pop? Are we going to go jazz? Are we going to go blah, blah, blah? So it takes a while. I don't just throw anything together because I really need time to process what I'm doing and to get a focus for myself and have a point of view. I want to communicate a thing, a style.
You mentioned that your husband, Greg, is a drummer. What's a jam session like for the two of you?
When we jam together, it's at a gig. When we do trio or quartet stuff, when we go out and do gigs that are much smaller, then you really get a sense of how a drummer really drives the whole thing. I didn't really have appreciation for fine drumming until I actually married a drummer, because I didn't know how complicated it is. You've got one brain and then you've got 4 limbs that have to do all different things at the same time. I just thought that was insane. I didn't know how anybody could pull that together. So I have a great respect and appreciation for drummers, but we don't just sit together and do a lot of jamming. It's always jamming with a purpose. But he's come from a long, fine jazz lineage. He was Sinatra's drummer. He played for Count Basie and Ella Fitzgerald and Ray Charles. And he's got some drummer's cred way before he ever met me. So he brings a lot to the party and a lot to me and a lot to the process.
I bet he's got some good Sinatra stories.
Oh, my God. Yeah, he does. And he's written about them. They're very well documented. And the ones that are not, they can't be told anyway.
I know I said earlier that I wouldn't ask any more collaboration questions, but I do think I need to ask one more. And that would be working with Michael Jackson.
When I went in to do this recording, I was taken into the green room and given a contract that was, I'm putting my fingers together, that was about, a half-inch thick. It was about 11 pages of non-disclosure thing. And I didn't want to read the whole thing, so I said to the assistant, I said, is this basically just to say that I wasn't here? And she said, yeah. And so I signed it, and I said, okay, fine. So it was the beginning when I got to the studio and signed this thing. And everything was very, very, literally very dark. The studio was Ocean Way at the time. It's a very famous studio where Sinatra used to record there all the time when it was United. But it was a massive sound stage, and most of the lights were really, really dim. And they just had one music stand where the music was and a light hanging over it. I mean, you can picture it. It's like an old soundstage kind of scene. And Michael and Bruce Swideen, who was his producer, were the only ones there in the booth. And we went in and just kind of talked down what he wanted. And he was very sweet, and he knew exactly what he wanted me to do. And so I went out there and did it. And, to this day, I don't know the name of the song. I've been trying to figure it out because every now and then I get this little stupid royalty check. It's from the History album. And I know that the History album was more than one CD. I don't know how many they were, but I never did know the name of the song. It was a lot of oohs and a couple of words that were sung that I never stood next to Michael. He did his vocals, and then people come in and did stuff over it. So it was a really interesting experience. It was a little strange in that it was so dark, just little lights from the board in the studio that you could see things. I got to tell you, it was strange, but it was lovely working for him. And like I said, I couldn't tell you the name of the song. I don't know where to find it. I've looked, but it was great. It was nice. It was lovely seeing that he was such a sweet person. He didn't act weird other than the lights being almost off, but he was a sweet, lovely, lovely guy. So I had that takeaway, which is really nice because you hear so many things about how bizarre he is, which none of that was going on when I was there. And I spent about 2 hours and then I left, and that was that.
It is interesting how, just in general, and I'm sure you've experienced this a little with your dad as well, how there's a media portrait and then who the person really is.
Well, yeah, that's true. My dad, when he first started doing concerts and opening, say, for Johnny Mathis, back when he was actually doing some symphony stuff and live concerts, he would be so shy and he would be looking down at his shoes a lot of the time. And his agent said, Henry, you got to look up and look out in the audience. And he was painfully shy and very humble. And he never took the celebrity or star thing seriously. He was out there doing a job, but he grew into it and then he became more of a performer and all that kind of stuff. So with my dad, it didn't seem like the perception was that different than the reality. But with Michael, I think it was very different. I mean, they were trying to create a persona, and whatever that was, he was. There was nobody like him. But Dad, he didn't pull celebrity stuff. And because he was such a musician at heart, when he went out and performed with the Boston Pops and London Philharmonic and all those people, he considered those his musician friends. He was one of the musicians, and he could relate to them in that way. And everyone loved working with him because of that he didn't pull rank. And he was a different kind of guy.
Monica, I want to thank you so much for coming on the I Play 2 podcast today and talking about your memories of growing up, your dad, performing with people like Michael Jackson. The Paul McCartney story was awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great holiday season and a Happy New Year.
Hey, same to you.